Hi there. The topic of today's video is usage-based licensing. We'll be going through an existing article in our documentation, and the goal of today's video is to look at the way you can configure usage-based licensing in the dashboard, as well as how you can implement it in your application. And I'll be using Python primarily in this tutorial. First of all, let's start with the two use cases that you can have when you have a usage-based licensing model. So the first one is where you charge your customers for the actual usage, and the second one is where you charge them upfront. So let's suppose, for example, that you offer your product as a subscription, so your customers pay on a monthly basis. But then, for example, if they want to use a particular feature, let's say it's an accounting software and they want to, let's say, generate an annual report, then you can have that as an extra that they have to pay for. So for each report that they generate, they have to pay later on. So in this case, you would track the number of times they've done it and then send them a bill in the end of the billing cycle based on the actual number of reports that they have created. The other option is to charge them for the credits up front. So for example, you can have if we go back to the subscription model, let's say they pay on a monthly basis, and then that entitles them to 10 credits. Then they can use those credits, and if they would need more credits, then they could purchase them as an addition. So these are two ways that you can support usage-based licensing. And as I said in the beginning, this is something you also can combine with other licensing models. So you can either offer your product as only using the usage-based licensing model. However, more commonly, it's combined with, let's say, a subscription where customers are given a certain amount of credits, and then depending on the plan, they get different kinds of credits. Because that's quite a common use case. So let's look at the dashboard and how it looks like. I already have a product here, and I want to show you how it works. So if we click on the license key and scroll down to the data object section, then there are two options. So the first one we'll have to use is this one, add or edit data object. And let's say that we call our data object, the one we'll be using. So a data object is like a variable, a custom variable that you can add to your license. They can store a string value and an integer value. So now we've created the test data object. And now also let's look at this option, manage credit usage. So this opens a view which is tailored to the use case of usage-based licensing. So here, for example, you can see how the usage has been changing over time. So let's suppose that we want to simulate, or like let's say you have an admin who needs to add 10 credits to this user. One way of doing it would be to do it in this view, but if you know in advance that you'll be using the usage-based licensing model, it'll be much easier to go, more convenient to use this view. So let's say we give them 10 credits, and we have to click on OK. And now the current value of test is 10. And then we can also track the history, as well as, let's say that let's simulate that they've used one of the credits. Now we decrease it by 1. And let's now decrease it by 9. So we set it to 0. So that's how you can do it in the dashboard. And also you might ask, so how can you automate the process of actually creating these data objects, because they're not created by default, and this is something you can do by creating a feature template, or license template. So when you click on create a new key, we have a separate tutorial where we cover how you can set it up so that your particular license type is shown here, and then you can create your license from template, and that will include the data object that, in this case, test, that you will use to count usage. Now let's look at the code part. So I've already prepared the code, so let's go through it. The first part is that we call, as normal, is that we call key.activate. So key.activate is the request that we send to Cryptolens. We provide the license key, and then this is a way for us to know if, for example, if the license is still valid, so it's not blocked and it hasn't been activated on more machines than permitted. So if we just run this code, so if we just write Python test, you can see license is valid. Now the second step, once we've verified the result variable here, it will include the license key object, and that license key object it will have the data object there as well. So let's take the first use case, is where you charge your customers based on the actual usage. So then you could use the following request here. You type data, increment int value to key. You provide the access token, and then product ID and the key. So that's the way to do it. And if you're unsure, you can always look at the code. Right, so int value has to be specified as well. I don't think we have done that, so let's do that. Int value is equal to 1. So let's see if it works, assuming this access token is still valid. It might not be. All right, this is very important, is that you also have to add the data class, otherwise it's not going to work. Let's see if the access token. Data not defined. Yes, now it works. So if we go back to the usage overview and just refresh the page, let's see what this has done. Okay, the access token was not correct. Let's recreate the access token. I think it's a good idea that we do that. So if you go to the Apple Cryptolens, access token, I think that was the issue. So we could go to the access token page and then increment int value. We can also click the decrement int value because we'll be using it later on. And then key lock should be set to -1. It's covered in the tutorial why that should be the case. Let's call it test. Good. Yeah, I think it was the access token issue. And similarly, also, it's a good practice is that we put this to be res, and then we can also get a more detailed error message in case this wouldn't work. So let's try this again. Object not found, right? We forgot to provide the name. That was the issue. So product ID, license key string, and the name. Run it. Perfect. Now it works. And then go back to the usage overview, and you can see the credit has been increased by 1. So this is I think this is the easiest way to access the data objects, is to just provide the name. Of course, you could also provide the ID, the unique ID of that object. You can obtain that from the license key object that's returned, but I think it's much more convenient to just provide the name. So let's just run it again, and you can see increased by 1. And then each time the features, each time the user clicks on that feature, it will be incremented by 1. Now let's simulate a different scenario, and let's say that this license comes with 10 credits. Now we're looking at the use case where the customer is given 10 credits, and then they can use them until they reach 0. And when you reach 0, they would have to purchase more credits. So I'll comment this method out. res2. I believe this access token should be correct, so we'll keep it as it is, but we will check the error message to help us debug. So as you can see here, I made the same mistake. I didn't provide the name, so let's provide the name of the data object. It's test. And there are 2 more variables that I would like to bring your attention to. It's enable bound set to true and bound 0. So that basically means is that once it reaches 0, it will no longer permit the user to deactivate or to decrement the integer value. So let's say that let's see what the best scenario here is. Right, I think we've configured everything right, so let's test run it. If the access token, perfect. So we had it set to 10, so decrease it by 0, right? We forgot one more parameter, int value should be set to 1. So what's the number of credits that we should decrement the license with? Go back to this view, now we decreased it to 1. And then you can go on and on and on. So let's say use it again, and use it again, and use it again, and get down to 6. Let's decrease this to 2. No, it'll be 4, right? So the current value is set to 2. And let's now just look at the error message and just see how this method will work. So I will call it again. It should work. Let's see what we have here. 1 left. And then let's call it again. And now we have 0 left. And we call it again. And then, as you can see, we get the error message, value cannot be changed as the upper lower bound was reached or the object doesn't exist. So essentially, we've reached the value 0, so we no longer permit the user to use that feature. So again, if they would purchase more credits, then you would just go to this page here, usage page, click on plus, and now usage would resume as normal, so they can continue using it. So we've covered 2 use cases. Primarily, the first one is where you charge them for the actual usage. In that case, you can use the method increment int value. So each time they use the feature, you increment it. And then the other use case is where they pay up front. So they get, let's say, 10 credits. And in that case, you would use the decrement method to essentially subtract, in this case, 1 from the integer value that we've defined. So you can read more about it in the following article. And there's also one thing to mention in addition to what we've just gone through, is that if you would like to implement this with Stripe, then there's a separate approach. It doesn't rely on data objects to support usage-based licensing. But that's also covered in this article. Thank you so much for watching, and please let us know if you would have any questions.